Kutter Crawford was the most underrated player on the 2023 Boston Red Sox roster. Find out why on today's Locked On Red Sox.
You are Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, and welcome to Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Gabby Hurlbut, former ESPN social media associate and current host of the Boston Balling podcast, and I am here to bring you the latest in all things Boston Red Sox, Monday through Friday, straight to your favorite feed for free. So be sure to start your day off right with Locked On Red Sox. I tend to feel like I bring a lot of energy, and that energy comes from how this team is making me feel. So if it's a good feeling, then it'll be a positive energy. If it's a rough feeling, it'll probably be a more negative energy, but I will try my best to keep it optimistic, as that is what I do here on the show. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Another day has gone by, and Yoshinobu Yamamoto is still not in a Boston Red Sox uniform. To say I'm disappointed would be a little dramatic, but I am a little disappointed. I mean, I want the Red Sox to sign him so badly. I think he'd be a fantastic fit in Boston. He makes sense for everything the Red Sox need right now on their pitching staff, and I'm just sitting here waiting for that notification from Ken Rosenthal or Jeff Passan saying the Red Sox have signed Yamamoto to a massive mega deal. That would be a dream come true, but that has been far from the case. The Red Sox offseason has been a little slow so far in terms of moves made. They've added some depth moves to the minor league system, but haven't really addressed the major league roster yet to the level that the Red Sox fans would like to see. Now, it's only November. There's still time. I trust Craig Breslow and the Red Sox front office to get a move on it and make the moves that Boston needs. I'm inclined to believe that the lack of reports of players is due to the fact that they're probably knee-deep in meetings with teams, and I know Ohtani was very vocal when he said he didn't want teams to know about the meetings he was having and didn't want it to be broadcasted what teams he was meeting with. So maybe other players are feeling the same way, and I'm not taking the lack of rumors buzzing as the Red Sox not doing anything. I think it's more everybody's busy getting these meetings done, and I feel pretty confident that the Red Sox will make some sort of move soon, and hopefully it's a smart one, because we just need a competent and competitive team in 2024. Since the team was not very competitive in 2023, there aren't a lot of positive aspects to take away from the season that they had, but I am here to take a little bit of a positive outlook on what happened in 2023 and go over the top 5 most underrated players for the Boston Red Sox in 2023. This could be pitchers, position players, anybody's in play here. And when I think of the word underrated when it comes to the Boston Red Sox, I associate it as players who made more of an impact on their team than people expected them to, and that people really talked about. So I think about it as players who were solid contributors to this Boston Red Sox team and provided a little bit of that light on a team that pretty much had a lot of dark moments in 2023. So to start with, my number 5 most underrated player on this Boston Red Sox roster in 2023 is a guy who the Red Sox signed a couple seasons ago, and this move kind of flew under the radar a little bit. It was a very quiet move. The Red Sox needed a backup catcher, and they needed somebody to come in and basically take care of business and do the job the best that he possibly could. So if you haven't figured it out, which I'm sure you have by now, Reese McGuire is my number 5 most underrated player on the Boston Red Sox in 2023. Did you know that he batted .267 on the season? Now, if you take a .267 batting average, it's obviously not fantastic, but it's not the worst. And for a backup catcher, usually you don't expect them to really bring that bat with them in play. Usually they're a below average hitter and hopefully a higher end defender. But he was able to provide some offense. He strung together 50 hits, 16 RBIs, and 15 runs on the year. And he also had 2 stolen bases. Can you believe that? That Reese was successful on a couple stolen base attempts because he's not the fastest guy in the world. He had an on-base percentage of .310 and a slugging percentage of .358. OPS was a little bit lower than typical hitters at .668, but it honestly, that's a pretty good group of numbers there for them to put up as a backup catcher. If you get a catcher that's making contact as much as they are, that's a win-win for a hitter like him. And keep in mind that he did miss some of the season with an injury. And Connor Wong was pulling a lot of the weight during his absence because when he was gone, they didn't really have a solid backup catcher to come in and take over. So Connor Wong had to be the guy who would step into that role. So Reese did miss some time due to an injury. And sometimes when a player misses time due to an injury, they come back and they aren't able to contribute in the way that they need to. But he did drive in some runs when there were runners on base and he came up to the plate. He started the season off pretty strong. He was batting .474 in mid-April, and for pretty much the entirety of April and into mid-May, he had over 300 batting average. 311 was his batting average on May 13th. And then he started to come back down to earth and drop down a little bit in mid-May, heading into June, and then he ended up missing the end of June and all of July with his injury, but he finished his June portion of the season on June 21st, and at that point he had a batting average of .267. And then when he returned in August and September, he stayed a little bit around there, around .270, and ultimately ended the season with that .267 batting average that I talked about. But he got the job done, and for a catcher, it's not every day you find somebody who's a relatively solid hitter who can give you what you need at the plate. So I think Reese was underrated in the fact that he was a backup catcher and was meant to be a backup catcher, and people didn't really look at him as anything beyond that. So I didn't really credit his hitting ability when they did that. Number 4 on the list is a guy who really flew under the radar quite a bit and wasn't really in a lot of the conversations as one of the top arms on this team. If you look at the Red Sox rotation, you could put the likes of Brian Bayo, maybe James Paxton's first half of the season in there as the top rotation arms. And then out of the bullpen, a lot of people would associate Chris Martin, Josh Winkowski, John Schreiber as being those key pieces out of the pen. But Brennan Bernardino really slid under the radar and was absolutely huge out of the Red Sox bullpen. He pitched to the tune of a .320 earned run average with a 2-1 record over 55 games pitched. He also recorded 6 saves. He came in crunch time so many times this season that I can't even count it off the top of my head right now. But there were a lot of times when the Red Sox were in a pinch. Maybe the other team had the bases loaded or there were runners on second and third with 1 out and the Red Sox were up by 1 run and they needed to conserve the lead. And Bernardino was the guy they would call in to come and pitch in a lot of those situations out of the pen. And more often than not, he did get that job done. He's not even a closer, and he recorded 6 saves on the year. And granted, the Red Sox, pitching staff was kind of moved around a lot this year. People stepping into roles they wouldn't normally step into because of injuries to the pitching staff. But he really embraced his role, and not a lot of people really talked about his contribution on this team, at least from what I saw. And whenever there was a situation where the Red Sox were in a pinch in a game and they needed a pitcher to come in that we could trust to come in and get the job done, Bernardino a lot of times was one of those pitchers I was pointing to as one of those reliable arms that the Red Sox could call upon to take care of the job in those situations. So I'm a huge Bernardino fan. I think if he pitches just as well as he did in 2023, he'll be one of the strongest arms out of that bullpen in 2024 as well. And that's not a knock on the Red Sox bullpen at all. I mean, the bullpen wasn't the strongest overall in 2023, but even if they were an average to above average bullpen, which for most of the season, you could say they were about an average pen until pitchers started to get overworked and then they kind of fell back. You could describe them as an average pen for most of the season. Bernardino was one of the reasons why they were above average for some of that season. So he was one of the best arms in the bullpen and just wasn't talked about enough in 2023. Coming up, I'm going to be going over the next 2 underrated players on my list on the 2023 Boston Red Sox, both of which contributed a lot to the team and really just flew underneath everybody's vision. So you won't want to miss that. Are you a huge fan of sports betting? Are you trying to get yourself involved in it? Or are you somewhere in the middle? Regardless of where you're at in your sports betting story, FanDuel has your back. Score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. There's no better way to really get into sports betting than to just join FanDuel. If you've been thinking about it at all, right now is the perfect time. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. FanDuel truly gives you the best options possible. There are so many different things you can do on there to win lots of money, and different types of bets that you can make are all included on there. So just head to FanDuel.com/lockedon and check out all the options that you have. Also, download the SiriusXM app. If you're worried about missing a single pitch of any Red Sox baseball game, you don't have to worry about that anymore. SiriusXM has you covered and will get you what you need for every home broadcast of every game, so that you can start your day off with Locked On Red Sox and finish your day with the SiriusXM broadcast, so you don't have to worry about missing the action. It's a great way to feel like you're still involved. When speaking to the most underrated players on the Boston Red Sox roster in 2023, there is one player who stood out to me. He's been a force in the Red Sox middle infield. He was somebody who kind of flew under the radar when the Red Sox first brought him on, and he's been able to acclimate himself very well to this Boston Red Sox team. He was not a defensive liability like a good portion of the Red Sox middle infielders were in the 2023 season, and he quietly hit over 300 for a good portion of it. And hitting over 300 is considered a very above average hitter. Pablo Reyes is who I'm talking about here. He ended the season with a 287 batting average and 2 home runs to go with 48 hits. He scored 27 runs and drove in 20. He also had 7 stolen bases. That's a stat about him that nearly nobody talked about. Stolen bases is an important stat in baseball because it can generate more runs. It can take a runner from not in scoring position to being in scoring position, and then it can allow whoever's at the plate to drive in that run with a single that they wouldn't have been able to do if that runner was on first base still. So those 7 stolen bases to me allude to the fact that Pablo made things happen when he was on the base paths, and also when he was hitting, he didn't shy away from being aggressive and going after pitches that he felt like were right for him. And you could rely on him a lot of times to get that job done for Boston that he needed to get done. He had a really good stretch in June, between June 16th to June 22nd, where he was batting over 300. His batting average hit 308 on June 19th with an on-base percentage of 343 and a slugging percentage of 369. He was getting himself on base a good amount of the time, and then kind of went back down to under 300 for the few times in July that he actually did hit, because he did have an injury that he faced where he missed about a month of the season in between June and late July. And then in August, he kind of went off again. His batting average was above 300 for pretty much the entire month of August. He was able to get it all the way up to 323 on August 24th, and then it went back down again in September to under 300, and he finished with a 287. But the point of saying all of that is that he was an over 300 hitter for a good portion of the season, and it wasn't talked about enough. Whenever the Red Sox needed somebody to come in and make contact at the plate, I trusted Pablo to be one of those hitters a good portion of the time. And when you look at the Red Sox roster, the offense was certainly not the biggest problem during the 2023 season, but there was room for improvement, and there were hitters who were automatic outs. A lot of the times they came to the plate, but Pablo was certainly not one of those hitters. And I always enjoyed the fact that he was able to get up there and get the job done when the Red Sox needed somebody to provide a little bit of a spark on offense and make that contact to drive in a run. Number 2 on my list is somebody who is known to be able to do different things. He primarily plays in the outfield, but he has seen a little bit of infield time throughout his tenure with the Boston Red Sox due to injuries and players having to be moved around for a variety of different reasons. And utility type players tend to fly under the radar on Major League Baseball teams because they don't always get the same level of playing time as everybody else. And that's the exact situation with this player here, who I see as the second most underrated player on this Boston Red Sox team in 2023. And that is Rob Refsnyder. Refsnyder is such a dad to me. He really comes across like the type of guy who's super responsible and disciplined, comes to the field every day, shows up, does what he was supposed to do, and then goes home and takes care of his family. Very just an upstanding guy who you can tell really enjoys spending time with his family outside of baseball and works super hard to be where he is. Now, keep in mind that a good reason why he wasn't playing every day for the Boston Red Sox in 2023 was because, as I mentioned, his primary position was in the outfield, and the Red Sox have an absolute surplus of outfielders on the team right now. That includes Jarren Duran, Cedar Rafaela, Alex Verdugo, Yoshida, Adam Duvall, and granted, not all of these players will be back to start the 2024 season, most likely, but he wasn't always really needed. One of the things they heavily used Refsnyder for was against left-handed pitching, because Jarren Duran significantly struggled against lefties. And I know there were Red Sox fans on Twitter who would express frustration whenever Duran was not in the lineup, because they wanted to see him continue to grow and develop due to the fact that he was going on this crazy run in 2023. But Refsnyder had significantly better numbers against lefties Duran just really struggled to make contact at the plate when there was a lefty up. And when you look at Refsnyder's numbers, they're nothing too special. I mean, he had a 248 batting average, 31 runs, and 28 RBIs. He also had 7 stolen bases to go with a 365 on base percentage and 317 slugging. He's never going to hit a lot of home runs. He only had 1 in the 2023 season, but he is going to make contact. He had 50 hits during the season. And when you have 50 hits and you don't play as regularly as some of the other players on the team, that's very telling for your ability level. And you could tell that Alex Cora felt the same way, because Cora would always have him come in to pinch hit with a lefty on the mound and traffic on the bases to see him try to drive in a run. And more often than not, he did drive in at least one run, maybe sometimes two, depending on the positioning of the runners that were on base. And he was always reliable in a pinch hit situation. And he could come in and play in the outfield or come in and play in the infield if absolutely needed, and make that transition seamlessly. I think these utility players aren't talked about enough in terms of how valuable they are to a team, but they truly do bring everything together in terms of the fact that you can slot them in wherever, because teams need players like that, especially if they're going through a lot of injuries. The Red Sox were absolutely plagued with injuries in 2023. So having a Rob Refsnyder on the team who could come in and get his job done when called upon and never miss a beat is very telling of the type of player he is. And he's definitely going to help keep everything together in 2024. Coming up, it's the moment you've been waiting for. Who is the most underrated Boston Red Sox player on the 2023 roster? You won't want to miss that, and it's coming up next. Locked On has some very exciting news for you. The network has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. This is so exciting for the network because nobody else has done this. Locked On is the first network to have a 24/7 streaming service where you can access any sports updates that you need at any time. It really is a 24/7 service. You will catch me on there when the Red Sox hopefully sign Yamamoto, and it's one of the biggest sports stories going on of that day. So if you don't have time to sit and scroll through Twitter, or you have to rush to get into work that day because you might be running late, go on that YouTube stream, get all of the most important updates from when you were sleeping, and make sure you are in the loop. So subscribe to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube, and you don't have to miss any of that action. You also don't have to miss any Red Sox game action if you download the SiriusXM app. It will actually generate the home broadcast of every game for you if you just search Red Sox on the app. It's so easy, and it makes you feel like you're still a part of the action. Granted, listening to it isn't the same as watching it. You can't see if a called strike was actually an outside pitch. You can't see exactly why somebody might be getting angry at a call that was made. But at least if you're listening to the game, you can still get those updates live and feel like you're involved in what's going on while it's happening, instead of having to go and look at the box score after the game. So download the SiriusXM app and search Red Sox. You won't regret it. Don't forget as well to continue to leave a review, leave a rating on Locked On Red Sox. You can catch new episodes Monday through Friday to your favorite podcast feed. The Locked On Podcast Network is your team every day. And follow me on Twitter at Gabby Hurlbut10, and we can continue the discussion that way of really talking Red Sox baseball, and especially now, hopefully, when the offseason starts to amp up a little bit more and more things are happening. So follow me on Twitter at Gabby Hurlbut10 so that you can get involved in more conversation and interact with other Red Sox fans who are on that app as well. The most underrated player on the Boston Red Sox roster in 2023 to me was Kutter Crawford. This guy has been bounced around in terms of his use and his role on this team. He primarily started off coming out of the bullpen a little bit and then was kind of rushed into joining the starting rotation during the 2022 season when the Red Sox faced some pitching injuries and they didn't really have a choice. So they called him up to pitch as a starter out of the rotation. And what a starter he's shaped himself into. He quietly shaped himself into a very reliable starter for this Red Sox team. In 2023, he pitched to a 404 earned run average with a record of 6-8 over 31 games pitched. He didn't have to necessarily be a high-end starter for this Red Sox team because they already had pitchers like Paxton and Bayo kind of as those quote-unquote top dogs in the rotation in 2023. They are not really top dogs. They just were what the Red Sox had in line at the moment. So Crawford really only needed to be a solid 4 or 5, but he's established himself as way better than a number 5 at this point. He's really, if not a number 4, maybe even a lower end number 3 starter at this point. If you look at the numbers, it doesn't seem like they're great, but he was able to show some improvement throughout the season as he got more and more comfortable on the mound. I mean, it was really fun to see his growth process. He really was able to get that earned run average down below 4 for a good chunk of the season. He was throwing 348 on June 3rd and then was throwing 365 by August 25th and then ultimately ended with a 404. And for the most part, he was kind of on a short leash in terms of innings pitched. He really was only seeing about 5 innings on average when he was throwing on the mound. And then Alex Cora would come out and pull him and put a reliever into the game. But Cora did allow him to stretch out his use and productivity towards the end of the season. So he kind of went from pitching 5 innings per start to getting more comfortable with pitching 6 innings per start. And the reason to me why that was underrated is because he was very effective while doing it. He helped the Red Sox get a lot of wins in 2023. And again, he wasn't the best starter on the team, but he didn't need to be. He was there to do the exact job that he did. And he did a very good job at what he was supposed to do for the Red Sox. And I also really like the ceiling he has. There's so much more room for growth for him. And he's also shown that he has the ability to improve because some players stay stagnant and don't really move up in terms of the way that they improve and aren't really growing as a professional baseball player. But he has shown that he's able to take feedback and can apply it to his game. And I'm excited to see how Andrew Bailey works with him because as the new pitching coach, he's a pitching guy and he's supposed to really understand these guys' regimes and what they do on a day-to-day basis to keep their arms warm for their next start. And he has to also understand the challenges that come with being a pitcher in Major League Baseball. I don't think Dave Bush, the former pitching coach, was really able to elevate the player's talent as much. So I'm excited to see what Andrew Bailey can do from that standpoint. And when you look at a player like Kutter Crawford, when he still has the ability to improve even more, I'm expecting a big season from him in 2024. So he deserves more recognition for what he really did do for this team in 2023 because he was there to be a lower end starter that could be relatively reliable. And for the most part, he was. So you can't really complain about what he did during the 2023 season. And I only expect it to go up from here for him moving forward. Don't forget to subscribe to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube so you can participate in the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. All you need to do is hit that subscribe button, and all of the local experts of Locked On will be there providing you with the best coverage of the content that's going on that day. And our national shows are there covering every league. So just head to the Locked On Sports Today YouTube channel and subscribe to that, because you'll feel so much more in the loop with everything going on in all sports, not just baseball. Don't forget, too, to download the SiriusXM app and search Red Sox, because you can get the home broadcast of every game straight to your feed. So you don't have to fear that you're not going to be able to watch the game live, so you won't know what's going on. You can still at least follow along and feel like you're in on the action. So do that today. Just download the app and search Red Sox, and you'll be all set up for the 2024 season. Like I always say, my friends, keep the faith, go Red Sox, and I will catch you on the flip side.